We have this from the New York Post. Senator demands Biden end covert mass amnesty by dismissing thousands of immigration cases. This was the big news, also by Jenny Tear. Republican Senator Josh Hawley is pressuring the Biden administration to end its practice of dismissing thousands of asylum cases, effectively giving migrants mass amnesty. So the Post reported 350,000 migrants were simply released. Their charges evaporated from the system, meaning they now live here with it's amnesty. It is the look. I'm sorry. There's no law anymore. Law and order has ceased to exist.
Really,
I want to stress this: 350,000 people are now living in the United States in limbo legal status. They do not face deportation at all. They cannot be deported. They have no cases against them. They also don't have right now, most of them, Social Security numbers, tax ID numbers, or work permits. So what is this? It is legal limbo created by the Biden administration, and they are creating a second-class citizen base. These people are going to work under the table. They're not going to pay as many taxes because they're working under the table, and they're just going to live here forever. That's the Biden administration, and there's millions and millions of people more, and they're going to be dismissing many more of these cases.
I think the worst part is the fact that the Biden administration, and again, the Democrats, have been accusing anyone that would say, hey, look, we have to stop this. You know, the argument has always been, or has in the past 15, 20 years, has been you're a bigot. It's not actually an argument about policy. It's a moral ad hominem attack that does no one any good. And it doesn't make for good policy either. So I don't know why you can't get a policy discussion well, I mean, actually, I do know why, because they don't want to have a policy discussion. But that is the case, and it's hard to deny that nowadays.
But I think we're good. I was worried for a little bit, but I think we're good now. The Post is reporting that Hawley sent a letter to Alejandro Mayorkas asking him to explain how they're tracking individuals after terminating their cases. Whew. I was concerned for a minute there. There was no strongly worded letter being sent out, but that's all I wanted. I just wanted to be able to shake my fist at the criminals that are ripping this country to shreds, just shaking my fist. And then I'll go back to sitting on my massage chair, eating wings and watching poker.
Well, Mayorkas is really good at being accountable. He's very honest. He always says, like, this is not true at all. This is a guy who the House impeached, remember. Then I just don't think anything's ever going to happen. I mean, if that was not symbolic of the Biden administration, that there is a crisis, the guy who is in charge of answering questions for this was impeached by at least half of Congress. Yeah. And then they're still like, we'll probably keep him in place. He seems pretty good to us.
This is something that people should need to acknowledge or should take notice of. It's exceedingly hard to end government programs, to fire people in government, to get rid of public sector unions, all this kind of stuff that's involved with the government, especially the feds. It's super hard to get rid of. That's why it's supposed to be a limited federal government that doesn't have a lot of powers. So that way, if they make something that's going to be impossible to get rid of, it is intended to have been arduous to create in the first place. And yes, there are some things that are difficult, and there is a lot of gridlock. I think we need more of it.
Gridlock is good.
Yeah, when they don't do anything, I like that.
All right. The only thing I don't really understand is why a lot of people that want strictly controlled borders want to just defer those powers to the federal monopoly. So the feds have a monopoly power on it. To me, it's like there'd be much stricter border controls if that's your kind of thing.
Because the feds demand a
monopoly. Abbott or Arizona that
It's because the Constitution mandates it.
It's because it's mandated.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice. If you get around it.
It's not an enumerated power. The federal government doesn't have the authority to do that. They do have power over naturalization, but not to create a border.
I'm pretty sure the issue constitutionally between Texas and the federal government was that, and I think the Supreme Court ruled this, that it's not within the power of a state to deport.
They say that, and then Abbott claimed that there's a constitutional prohibition that allows him to exert that if there's an invasion taking place.
Right.
Whether it's an invasion, he's claiming that he has the ability and impetus to decide that.
And
as far as immigration itself, the first time the feds even claimed a monopoly on immigration authority was the 1875 Page Act.
Right.
We can going back and being like, look, you don't have this power is exceedingly unproductive.
But
I don't disagree
also
with
They have
that,
the
Phil,
guns.
Yeah, I don't disagree with
but think
that.
about what that means. If we defer to states for immigration, then Arizona, Nevada, Texas, but all these countries will build borders and set up checkpoints to keep people out from entering. And I'm talking about within the United States. Arizona especially, because California would instantly say anyone can come. And then what they'll do is they'll bring them all in, give them California IDs and say, now go off into the land and wherever you want to go. And then you're going to end up with physical conflict. I mean, it's happening. You had a Venezuelan illegal immigrant shoot 2 cops because we don't know who these people are. We don't know where they're coming from. What we do know is many of these people are criminals with criminal histories coming here to escape accountability in their home countries because Biden's going to let them in. They're going to get free stuff. They're going to get taxpayer money. So I'll argue this. If libertarians want to argue for open borders, before we get to that, we have to get to ending the welfare state. We all agree. So let's end the welfare state. No welfare for literally anybody. Then we'll start arguing over whether there can be borders.
What's your take on border security? You just think?
Yeah, no, I believe in
hang out?
privatized borders, just like Hoppe and Rothbard. I'll cite them. And if you say that that's a pie in the sky thing, I think federal suppression of the border is a pie in the sky thing that won't happen. So much of the borderlands
Why
has
won't
been
it
taken
happen?
by eminent
And
domain.
how do you explain the fact that they've been actually, having a border? There's a border in between us and Canada.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's the impetus of the welfare state. I think there's something to that. But on the southern border, regardless of the composition of the legislature, whether it be Reagan had a semi-amnesty in 85 or whatever it was, and Trump didn't shut it down in his first administration. I see no reason to think that it will ever be shut down.
That's not because
With the
it's not
federal
possible.
policy.
It's because there's I actually know. Do you believe that it's because it's not possible, or do you believe it's because the government lacks the will?
Yeah, primarily the latter, which is why I think it's not possible. I mean, we don't have many people in Congress that would fight tooth and nail because of voter blocks. I think that's it, even on the Republican side.
This is one of the reasons why I'm strongly against illegal immigration. And we absolutely need to set a limit on immigration in general. California is a great example of how we got to where we are today. The simple analogy that I use every single time, it's got a real world analog in California. You live in a house with a roommate. Your roommate invites some guy to sleep on the couch. You say, hey, I don't agree to this. And then you get into an argument. He says, let him just stay here for a little bit. You say, okay, fine. A week later, you guys are like, let's vote on what's for lunch. And you want pizza and they both want wings. And then you're like, well, what the hell? Why is he voting against me? He's a guest. And they're like, well, he lives here too. Then the next day, another guy shows up, sleeps on the recliner, and you're like, I didn't say he could live here. And like, well, we voted, and it's 2 against 1. He's allowed to live here now. This is what happened in California. They allowed a bunch of illegal immigrants in, granted amnesty, created people who had no ties to the community living in the state, and then when the state tried to shut down the welfare state, all of those people that now had connections to family members who were illegal immigrants or did not live in the country, protested it. There was mass protests. There were riots. And then that was the end of California as a Republican state. You led and new citizens. We got 3.5 million new voters, new citizens now granted the right to vote since 2020. And they support Democrats 56%. You let people into your house who don't support your values and want to send money outside of your country. They're going to vote for it. Why would you let someone into your house who wants to take your stuff and sell it to vote for the ability to take your stuff and sell it? That's what's happening in this country right now. Our resources are being gutted and extracted. You look at that video in Boston where there was that black dude trying to go to the community center and the cops blocked him. Why? It was given to illegal immigrants, and he's furious. This is what's happening. The things that you build for your children are being given away because Democrats want open borders, and that will be the end of this country. We are already to a point where young millennials, it was Tyler Hansen. Tyler Hansen, am I getting his name wrong again? Taylor Hansen. Yeah. I always mix up Tyler and Taylor. He was interviewing some people. It's on, I retweeted it. He asked these 2 lefties if illegal immigrants should be allowed to vote. They say, yeah, of course. If they live here, they can vote. Well, that's the end of your country, period. That's it. It's over. Because they're going to be like, dude, there's a rich guy who lives in Beverly Hills. He's got a big mansion. It's $40 million. He's letting anybody come in. I'm going to bring all my friends. We're going to come in and we're going to vote to take it from him. And he's going to let us do it.
Well, and it raises the need for citizenship and civic participation from as a reward, as a component of voting, right? Like, I guess I don't totally understand your position, in part because, like, I would be happy if the states did more to secure the borders. Under our current administration, they're saying, no, you can't do that, right? But if we're going to have a federal government, which, again, I agree with you, maybe the federal government shouldn't have a monopoly on controlling the border, but I would much rather see our forces, both our military resources and our literal personnel forces at the border securing the country we all are a part of than being like, well, it's cool, just go to Ukraine. That sounds good. I think ultimately we forget that immigration affects how our culture develops over time. And to say it's cool, just show up is not the same thing as maintaining a strong and civic-minded population.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be just clear here, it's not my ideal for it to be kicked back to the states, although I think that would be better than the status quo, especially for places like Texas and Nevada, Arizona. But my ideal is privatizing the borders and allowing individual property owners discretion over who comes into their territory. And there could be like a sponsorship component to that. Like, hey, I assume some of the legal liability for this guy. A lot of the borderlands have been taken by eminent domain. And again, I know this is like a radical thing, but that's my position ultimately in the ideal.
But what about in the practical?
I think kicking it down to the states is a better ideal. And to Tim's point, I think there's nothing about Tim's point that was wrong. But I also think that I have as much of a kindred association to people in California than I do to like people in Mongolia. I say that's the Federalist experiment. You let them do that, and you let border states be able to make restrictions of who comes into that state. And we have federalism as a model where people can vote with their feet and go where they think this society will flourish better.
So, I mean, yeah, but it sounds like you're just saying national divorce.
I'll say that too, national divorce.
Yeah, like each state should be its own sovereign state and go back to like a non-existent federal government with weak powers.
Yeah, are you an anarchist?
I'm for that too. Yeah, I'm an anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah.
And it all comes out now.
Yeah, but if that's the case, then why would you respect a state having the same powers?
I don't respect it, but compared to the status quo, I do, because number one, I think it's constitutional, and number two, I'm a radical decentralist, and that's a better thing to me than allowing Washington, D.C. to control it, because the extension of that argument is, why don't we allow the UN to control it?
Because they're not the United States.
Agreed.
And we have an elected government.
Yeah, and I don't respect Washington, D.C. for the same reasons I don't respect globalists at the UN.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.